Hey everyone, welcome to part 2 of my video called Why I Left Biblical Judaism, and be sure to hit the subscribe button and the like button to help my channel out. And now back to the video. Hey everyone, welcome back. This is going to be part 2 in my discussion Why I Left Biblical Judaism. I'm actually going to take a little bit of part 1 so we know where we left off. Alright, and thank you for watching. Remember, we had two waves going into Babylon, 597 and 586. And so this kingdom of Urartu got conquered by the Medes, if I remember right, in 590. So when we went to Babylon and adopted these myths, we know the name of that region, you know. And so with that time frame of 840, 860 all the way to 590, that tells you Moses couldn't have wrote this because he's supposed to be living around 1495 when the Exodus happens. So he would say, oh my God. So you got this whole entire myth. You don't even know the Genesis part yet, but I see it, you know, and you can see that on their kings list they lived for a long time, like 20,000 years. The kings reigned that long, I mean. And so, and where you see our guys living 900 years, you know, for Noah and Adam and Methuselah and things like that. So you have these issues. So I saw that the first 11 chapters are literally Babylonian myth, and I wasn't even aware of, you know, Adam with Eve being made out of the side or rib of Adam. And this is a total myth of ancient Sumer about this god, you know, having basically, I think, semen hitting the side, and this is, you know, is formed out of his side, and she becomes the mother of living, and this person, this deity over there, is like, her name is such and such, and says basically, means living, or mother of the living. I'll have to find all that out and put it on the screen. But I was like, oh my God. So I was like, so when this was back in 2010. Hold on, I'm gonna turn it off. All right, I'm back. And get some water. And if I guess I start this video or cut it into part 2, this is part 2, okay, of my video here. Anyway, back in when I saw the Noah thing, and like I said, unaware of the Adam and Eve myth, but I did see the Noah thing and the kings over there lived for so long, and I was studying their kings. I forgot what the guy's name is, but he was like the 7th on the list, king's list, when the 7th dude was taught by the gods over there all these magical arts, and so, and basically walked with those gods or something. Then when you look at Genesis, our 7th guy is Enoch, and I'm like, really, dude? So I was like, the whole Genesis 1 through 11 I just threw away outright, kind of like the Chronicles one, threw it out. So I was like, ugh. So I didn't have too much of a problem with throwing that out, and excuse me, you know, because even though creation was all in there, and I knew, and plus the science of Genesis chapter 1 with what the universe is supposed to look like according to Genesis, where here's the earth, you know, not necessarily it's flat, you know, because I was a amateur astronomer, you know, and you can see the shadow of the earth on the moon, so you know it's kind of round. So I didn't have a problem, you know, where people say, oh, that's where you get the flat earth from, you know, there's a dome. I never really believed in that to a point, even though I'd see pictures of the Sumerian one. I always just believed it as, you know, round, and above all the heavenly hosts there's a big water dome around it. So just like the Genesis, but because Genesis doesn't bluntly say flat, you know, flat earth or anything, it, you know, just puts it up there. And So I was using my modern knowledge, where if I lived back then, people may not have known the world was round, as far as the common folks. Now, the astronomers is a different story because they would saw the shadow of, what do you call it? The shadow of the Earth on the moon during the eclipses. When the moon is full, that's when the lunar eclipses always happen. And solar eclipses always happen on the new moons. So, anyway, I didn't have a problem throwing Genesis out, because I know my science now, but even with my own, see, at first when you look at Genesis, talk about Genesis, you just kind of, everything goes from you when you see the North Star just sitting there, it's kind of like moving, it does move. If you look at time-lapse photography, or if you're a stargazer, you can see it move. It's just kind of moves real. It's a small circle, but you see, like everything else is sun and moon, stars, planets. Everything goes from the east and sets in the west. And so, but so I'm like, well, I don't know. At that time, at the beginning, before I knew stuff, I learned stuff in school, but it didn't really sink in. So I learned astronomy on my own and would study all that, but then I learned, like, I don't know how to say his name, Ptolemy, but it's PT, I think, Ptolemy or something. Anyway, around 100 AD CE, he thought that he saw that Venus and Mercury revolving around the sun. So when the sun sets, Venus is going around like that. So Venus in the sky when the sun sets can't go any higher than that, because that's the end of the orbit. It can't go high as that because it's following the sun, And so I was like, oh, okay. Then when it's down here, you only see it at sunrise, So that's why it's called the evening star and the morning star, or something like that. And it's a planet, but they maybe didn't know that. And at that time, there were just there was 5 planets only known at that time, because that's all your naked eye could see. So you had Merc, Venus, of course, you can look down and see us. But Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, But and that's all you can see with the naked eye. So anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. But anyway, so kind of like with the Genesis thing, I know it's false, but I didn't have a problem with it, seeing it in my, I said, well, how can scientists even see past the furthest galaxy and furthest star? Because that's what Genesis says. It says, between the two waters is all the host of heaven, all the stars, the sun, and the moon, and so you couldn't, logically, there's no telescope that could look past all the host of heaven. It's massive, so I just like, don't know. So, and in reality, not that I believe that, I'm just saying in a debate, in reality, you can't see that far. You don't know if there's water out there, and plus in black space, it's not going to show up, so anyway, so that's kind of my reason. So I throw away Genesis. This is back in 2010 when I threw away the flood and Genesis 1 through 11. And so I had all these problems. And then it was one Sabbath, and this is how I threw away the concept of Messiah. So now my Judaism is unraveling big time. It's already unraveled a little bit, but I was still pretty anchored, Believed in the Exodus, and the future Mashiach coming. And so I was studying Daniel 2. And to be precise, and Daniel 2 was and is pretty precise. Now, I don't know what you would call this. I'm drying up again. Anyway, Daniel 2 is pretty accurate. Pretty accurate. Now, I don't know what the term would be. Maybe like post author prophesying. I don't know what you would coin it. Coin the phrase, but after the fact prophesying, I guess you can say it that way. After the fact prophesying by a different author, and then him putting the words in so-and-so's mouth. So in Daniel 2, it talks about Nebuchadnezzar sees this dream, then he wakes up, he forgets, and no one could help him out. So Daniel comes around and tells him about this dream. And there's this great statue, the head is gold down here, the arms and chest are silver or whatever, and then it's bronze, then the rest is iron, and the toes is iron mixed with clay. And so then all of a sudden, during the time of these kings, now I'm paraphrasing, a great rock or boulder will be cut out of the mountain and it'll take over the world. I said, okay, that's the Messiah, and that's the prophecy, okay? Now this is where I throw away the Messiah concept, because Daniel interprets some of it, and he says, that head of gold is you, O Nebuchadnezzar. And so we know the one, and the prophecy is so detailed. So the next is Cyrus. The next is Alexander, and we know that Alexander's son died before he did, and so Alexander couldn't pass his kingdom down to his heir, so his kingdom was divided up to his generals. He had more than 4 generals, I believe, but it basically dwindled down to 4. Then there's 2 mighty ones, basically like that. So you have Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus, and Alexander is the bronze, and the iron mixed with clay, or the time of the generals. Well, the prophecy is, in the days of those kings, the rock will be cut out of the mountain and the Messiah will come. Well, this is kind of during the Maccabean time, when you have the Egyptian people in Alexandria, Egypt, I don't know how to say their name, Ptolemy or something like that, those, and the Seleucids up in Lucia and Antioch, that gave us grief. And so it says during this time is when the Mashiach will come, because the Roman Empire is nowhere mentioned in there. And so it's during these times, because the Roman Empire takes over Israel, and you got to keep in mind, Israel is the main key to all Jewish scripture. Who cares about anybody else? So Jewish writings are for Jewish people, and so Jewish prophecies are typically for Jewish people. And so when Rome comes on the scene, when his name was Pompey, I believe, in 67-ish. Anyway, the Messiah was supposed to come before that. And so he didn't come. So I saw that this is a post-event prophecy. It's like me now in 2022. I could learn more about George Washington. My education on George is limited, but I could study more of George Washington and know his parents and his grandparents, and write in such a way that I make his grandparents prophesy about George Washington, who came later. And because I lived so much later, 2022, I could be accurate in my prophesying. It's like, oh wow, his grandparent, his grandpa, Lawrence, was way accurate. How, about George Washington. Wow. And so this is kind of like what Daniel is doing. Whoever this author is of Daniel is way after the fact, or living way after the fact. And so he is taking facts that already happened and throwing those facts in the mouth of someone before, And so this is why the prophecy is so perfect up to a point. See, the thing about Daniel is he is living during the time, whoever this author is, that is, he is living during the time when the Alexandrian generals and their kids are reigning and ruling. But this is before the Roman Empire. And so this is why he is so-called accurate in his prophesying, but then it falls dead on arrival. It's kind of like me. If I want to talk about George Washington in such a way as in a prophecy, I just put words in George Washington's grandpa's mouth, from a guy named Lawrence. And I talk, I could say in such a way, in the future, he will be the first president of the Americas, called the United States of America, in 1776. And in December of 1776, he'll cross the Delaware River with 2,400 people or thereabout to attack a garrison at Trenton, and where there's 1,500 people there, and he'll be victorious. So you could talk like that, and then here later, you find this book, hundreds of years later, you're like, whoa, how was he so accurate? In his prophesying. Well, it's because in reality, I live way after the fact when these events took place, and now I'm just writing in such a way his grandpa said stuff when he never did. So, anyway. And so, blah, blah, blah. And so, that's what Daniel is doing. There's a guy way after the fact putting words. He already knows all this stuff. So it tells you he is living during the time of the Alexander the Great general time, but before Rome comes into play. And so he's throwing all these words on the Daniel in Daniel 2. Daniel didn't write all that because he's from 586 to 530 when so-called Cyrus is around. So this is why it's so accurate. Why it's so accurate. Then all of a sudden it falls flat on his face, and the Messiah never came in the time frame of Daniel 2, which was supposed to be before Pompey, the Roman general, came around Israel. You see what I'm saying? So this made me say this whole thing is, because this is one of the only books that bluntly promotes a Messiah. All the other ones are just talking about maybe David's kids, descendants, but doesn't talk about a worldly guy taking over all nations like Daniel does. So I was like, oh my God. So this thing's is totally invented. Totally. 100% invented. So, so I threw away the whole entire concept of the Messiah out. This is now in 2013, maybe, because I threw away Genesis 1 through 11 in 2010. Excuse me. So, and I threw away the concept of the Messiah around 2013. And I was like, all right, well, so much for that. And Daniel, I'm not going to talk about that part, but anyway, so I threw away that whole entire concept. And so when I saw that there is no such thing as a Messiah was totally invented, I was just kind of laughed at Christendom, because their whole entire religion is based on a Messiah dying for their sin. And I was like, said, if I'm lost, how much more so them? So, anyway, because Judaism isn't lost with the lacking of a Messiah. So I didn't have a problem with that, because Judaism, you got to understand, now that I'm learning that I learned that the Torah wasn't written by Moses. I learned some other stuff, that the Torah was written around, our current Torah was pinned down probably around 390. Now, the main clincher to really point out when the Torah was probably pinned down is by the book of Nehemiah, chapter 9. And why? Why chapter 9? Because there's 3 places in the Torah that talks about Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. And the Day of Atonement is in Leviticus 16, Leviticus 23, and Numbers 29. Okay? It's in there. It's established, you know. And on the 10th day of the 7th month you shall fast. You shall not have nothing, no water, no food, you shall fast. And I forgot what the wording is. It's not torment yourself, but it's, neglect yourself, but it's stronger than neglect. But however, when you look at Nehemiah chapter 9, when Ezra and Nehemiah and the people are coming out of Persia, and here they are in the 7th month on the first day, they're reading the law. They're reading the law, you know. I don't think they say of Moses. It might be, but it says they're reading the law of the Lord. It might be of Moses, but it's not the one we got today. So anyway, they're hell-bent of wanting to keep it now that they're back, you know, and now they're back in Judah, blah, blah, blah. They're gung-ho of keeping it. And so they see that in the 7th month there's a feast going on there, and it's the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. And so they're gung-ho to obey the Lord so they won't be cursed anymore, blah, blah, blah. So they just got to start with this, blah, blah, blah. And so they get all the branches and make their tabernacles as the law says, you know, but there's something missing. This is on the first day they're reading the law. And they're talking about, a festival from the 15th to the 21st, and there's a kind of a rest day on the 22nd, correct? Okay. Did I say that right? Man, I did. Dang. Yeah, it's an 8-day feast. Well, 7-day with an 8th day tacked on the rest. So anyway, there's no mention of anything happening on the 10th, Yom Kippur. Nothing. Doesn't say they fast, doesn't say nothing. And so here it is, we read, and they keep the Feast of Tabernacles just like the law says. But then after the feast, guess what? On the 25th of the month, like, okay, the last day is for the 8th day of the feast is the 22nd, because it's an 8-day long deal. It's the 22nd. It says, so on the 25th, I was confusing it earlier, not in this video, it was somewhere else, the 24th, but I think it was on the 25th. And it could be the 24th, but so I'll put it on here just to confirm it. Anyway, I'll go with the 25th for right now. On the 25th, the people put on sackcloth and ashes and fasted. I was like, oh my God, they're doing Yom Kippur on the 25th. And this book is more closer to our time frame today than the so-called Torah would be, by supposedly Moses. Yet the Torah has Yom Kippur, it has to be observed on the 10th. Yet these guys who are coming out of Persia, who are reading the law, don't read it in the law. And so they observe it on the 25th. And so I was like, this guy gives you a timestamp. This is the Torah was written after Nehemiah, just by Yom Kippur alone, because they move it to the 10th. And probably with logical reasoning, they want to purify themselves before the great harvest feast, the Feast of Tabernacles, why be a so-called sinner or have all this guilt going into the feast when you could purge yourself before the feast, be guilt-free, things like that. And I was like, oh my God, this thing is so fake, it's pathetic. I said, it's totally invented right then and there. And so I saw that the Torah was made, so it all makes sense now, okay? And I just add more as time goes by, as studying Adam and Eve, how, Eve came out of the rib, it came from a Sumerian myth of this certain deity, blah, blah, blah. And this and that, and it's just crazy talking. And like Moses, the story of Moses, the myth of Moses, he is a yes, he's a Levite. There's no priest yet, okay? And but he is a Levite, the future priest. And so because of slavery in Egypt, the mom, and not slavery yet. I don't think yet. No, it's just based on population, I think. No, there's slavery, and the people were multiplying, and so Pharaoh wanted to kill the kids, and so the mom puts them in a bag, puts them in a reed basket and coats it with bitumen or pitch, and puts them in the Nile, and guess who takes them? It ends up being Pharaoh's daughter, and he grows up in Pharaoh's daughter's, grows up in the Pharaoh household. And so this whole story is adopted from the myth of Sargon, king of Akkad, the Akkadians. And because if you look, go online, look up Sargon, the myth of Sargon of his birth. It's verbatim the same, okay? It says something like, okay, and then also Moses ends up being of the priests and of the Levites too, and he becomes like the main guy. And of course he anoints his brother as the main high priest. So the Levites. Okay, how coincidental is this? So here's the Sargon story. I forgot some of the Sargon story, but anyway, the Sargon's mom was a priestess, if I remember right, and something happens, and maybe it's the other way around, but anyway, she takes Sargon, puts him in a reed basket, and puts bitumen, which is basically pitch, puts them in the Euphrates River or Tigris River to save him, and a priestess, maybe it's that way, and a priestess or a priest, a guy, finds him and then lets him raise in that household. And so I'm like, oh my God, we adopted that myth too. And it's like I threw it on Moses. None of this happened. It's just like all these regurgitated stories. I'm like, why are you doing this, dude? So then it wasn't until later, so that still did not clinch it for me walking away, even though I'm seeing all this stuff. I'm like, oh my God, really? Now, okay, I have to walk that back a little bit. The Sargon thing I just learned within the last 2 years, so I have to walk that back. That's added to my history now, which I'm glad I walked away. But what did it for me is, like I said, I like to study and do this and do that, and so I said, well, I'm going to study the Exodus. And because Passover, kind of like right now, it's now spring. We just had our spring equinox. Today's the 22nd of March, and so the equinox happened 2 days ago. So I'd study it and say, well, it's such a great event. There has to be something, in the hieroglyphics or Egyptian culture or something that has it. And so, I did my own homework, you know. I guess it might be a guy thing. I haven't had too much girls doing this. Excuse me for a minute. Now I might videotape my TV off this website I got off of ancientjudaism.blogspot.com. Anyway, I give the age of the earth, because I believed in a young earth too at one time. I didn't have a problem with dinosaur issues. Couldn't explain it. I just wouldn't even go there. And I was just like, I don't know nothing, you know. So I wouldn't go there. Bible doesn't talk about it. You know, Leviathan is Lotan, so not no dinosaur creature. I mean, Lotan is in the mythologies of Canaan, he's a seven-headed sea dragon creature, and so Lotan became Leviathan. But anyway, what did it for me, I was like, well, maybe I'll study and see if this is, you know, I like to make sure, you know. So I did what I was going to say on this website was I give, like right now, if you go there now, because I just redid it again, to update it, it's like the age of the earth, if you were going to believe the Bible to be accurate about the age of the earth, the year is, not counting birthdays, is approximate, okay, not precise, 6184. How do you come up with that number, okay? And it's basically 5 segments-ish. I would have to count them, I guess. I guess I could write it down right now. Do the study right in front of you. So anyway, get this paper here. Not that paper, not that. Any blanks here? There's a blank. All right. If you know how it says in Scripture, it's like when Adam was 130 years old, he begot Shem. And then Shem begot Enoch, or Enosh, or whatever it says. And so, and they were this old when they begot them. And then they lived so many years after that. Got more children, you know, sons and daughters. And so if you take Adam all the way to Jacob, like Adam all the way to when Isaac begets Jacob, you know, but I want to mention Jacob for a minute. When Jacob goes into Egypt, and you know, Jacob was, I think if I remember, he dies at 147, but he enters into Egypt when he is 130, if I remember that right. So you got Adam to Jacob. That's one segment. And so when he's 130, he enters into Egypt, right? So and all the rest of his descendants, you know, the 11 tribes, I guess, or those who became tribes later on, according to the myth anyway, they remain in Egypt for 430 years. So, and that's to the Exodus. So Jacob to Exodus. Then it says, so you don't need birthdays after that, or those things after that. So then it says, I think it's in 1 Kings chapter 6, somewhere, verse 1, I think, I don't know. And it says, it's the 4th year of King Solomon's reign. It says, and it says 480 years before this point was the Exodus. So you got 480 years. So far you got from Adam all the way to the 4th year of Solomon's reign. So that's number 3. 3rd segment. So Exodus, X to 4th of Saul of none. Okay. Then you count, maybe it's only 4 segments. Then, well, yeah, okay, fine. And so then you count, okay, yeah, Solomon reigns for 40 years altogether, so there's 36 more years. Then it goes to Rehoboam. he reigns for so long, then so whoever's after him also, or whoever, and then all the way to Zedekiah, the last king of Judah. So you add all those dates of the reigns, how long they reigned, in the one queen there at one time, and so then you add all those reigns together, and you see that Nebuchadnezzar comes in Zedekiah's 11th year, and we know that by history, which is in 586. So that's a concrete thing, 586. That's our modern calendar, not this adding. So if you take 586 BC and add all these, like the Adam to Jacob, then the Exodus, how long they were in Egypt, then from the Exodus to Solomon's reign and all this, then our current date, 2022, and minus year zero, because there is no year zero, and blah blah blah, ends up being 6184. Okay, right there. Now, why am I saying this? I don't know why I'm saying this. I forgot. I don't know why I'm saying this to begin with. Too tired, I guess. Maybe I'll come up with it. Why was I saying this? Oh, talking about the Exodus. So now you're backtracking, okay? So you got, I'm not going to do it off the top of my head. I guess I can. But, I can't. I have to look at it. Anyway, oh yeah, I already know about it. Anyway, according to this time frame, this is the biblical time frame, not the rabbis. The rabbis say some crazy off stuff. I don't know where they get their dating from. They're like 300 years off from the total. And so I don't know where they're getting their calendar date from, but it baffles me. It just baffles me. Anyway, blah blah blah. According to this, the Exodus was approximately 1495 BCE. Let me put that on here. Right around here, okay? This is what's going to be the clincher why I walked away from Judaism altogether. What did I say? 1495. Right there. BCE, right there. That's the Exodus right there, that date, according to the Bible, and those time frames. So, and where the rabbis say like 1250, 1220, why do they say that? Because it says, and they built Pi Ramses, that's why. And so Ramses has to be named after Ramses. So Ramses reigned for a long time, and it was like a long time, like 1270 to 1220 or something like that. Anyway, so they used during Ramses' time. So, which that's not the biblical date. And time frame what the elders back then who wrote the Torah are pinpointing to, not the modern elders. The actual people who made the book. So anyway, I'm like studying, so I have that in my mind, right? So I was like, so I look down the king's list, just normal history. I don't go by the rabbis of the 1230 zone. I go in the 1505-ish zone. So I just pick off 100 years, in there, because of birthdays and whatever, oopses. And so I finally come across, like, okay, in the hieroglyphics, studying this and studying that. So I saw that some Asiatics, Semites, or Semitics, excuse me, Semitics came down, that they called the Asiatics, came down from Canaan, and they wore colorful clothes. Not just one guy named Joseph, but they all did, and they were shepherds. They had beards. I might put it right here so you can see it for yourself. And this is on like the walls of Egypt to this day, and they called them the Asiatics. And eventually they settled in like the delta region of Egypt, Nile Delta. And so you're like, oh, cool, this is the ring of truth around here, and this is like in the 1800 BCE, where I'm trying to this is when they came down, and so I'm trying to get close to this 1495, 1505 time frame, somewhere around there. And so you go on and read on, and going down these kings lists, and it says, the reign of the Hyksos people. I'm like, who are these people? And they're not just blunt pharaohs. I mean, they became pharaohs too, but they are not Egyptian people. So who's these Hyksos people, or however you say their name? And they ended up being, Semitic people. And they ruled over the Nile Delta zone of Egypt. And so I was like, well, this is different from the Jewish Bible. And I have one eyebrow and my eyebrows up. And so they enslaved the Egyptians. And so, somewhere around 1530, I'm just going to round numbers off, 1535. King down here on the Ethiopian side of Egypt, Upper Egypt, I guess would be called. And a guy named King, or Pharaoh, Ahmose, right, take that out of there, Ahmose. I don't know how to say his name in Egyptian language, but Ahmose came up to the Nile Delta, and it says there was a city called Avaris, okay? Just keep that in mind, Avaris. In the Nile Delta area, and where these Hyksos Semitic people were reigning. So Ahmose took over one Hyksos town, but not the capital of Avaris, and then dies unexpectedly. So his brother takes over. Anyway, his name is Ahmose, and he went up to Avaris, and he conquered them and literally drove them. Now this is in like 1522. Now remember, my date that I'm trying to find is somewhere around there. 1505 when I first did this study, not 1495. But so anyway, it's like 1522 when Ahmose conquers these Hyksos people and drove them to Canaan. These Asiatics with colorful clothes, they used to be that way anyway, and drove them to Canaan. I'm like, oh my God, really? And I said, so you look up Avaris, right? Do your homework on this town of Avaris, and guess where it is? I'll tell you in a second. So after Ahmose drives them away to Canaan, they just kind of get absorbed into the Canaan world, And so, let me write Avaris down. Now this is Avaris. So what happens after Avaris gets conquered and these guys, these Semitic people, get drove to Canaan, guess what happens? The Egyptians are happy, and now they could take all of Egypt now, like they used to have before they came around, and they built their city, built a new city on top of Avaris, and what's that city's name? The Biblical Ramses. So no, we did not build the Ramses. We built the city that was under it. So I said to myself, I'm like, oh my God, there was no Exodus, no blood on the doorpost, redeeming the firstborn children, splitting of the water, and going through on dry land. None of that. That's all malarkey. I said we were conquered by the pharaohs, and we were driven up, going on the beach coast, and we were the Hyksos, and we just got absorbed in Canaanite culture, and we were never monotheistic. We were polytheistic. And I was like, okay, and that's what did it for me. Well, I'm out. So, why? Judaism as a whole is literally founded as the monotheistic, not monotheism outright, but Judaism as what you do and practice and things like that, is literally founded upon that one single event. From Passover, like I said, the Sabbath. Why do you keep Sabbath? Because we're slaves in Egypt, depending on which one you want to do. And to whatever, a lot of it was based on the whole Exodus story. I already had because I was already seeing things like, why is it called the Feast of Tabernacles versus the Harvest Feast? Gotta remember, people were always living in Canaan for thousands and thousands of years. And so, not the age of the earth times like just 4,000 up to 4,000 BC, something like that. You know what I mean? They were there long before that. And when people started doing farming, they were already religious. They already, the polytheism was already well established pretty much. And blah, blah, blah. And so people in thanks would give offerings to their gods. They go up to the high places because they thought they were closer because he's somewhere up there. And so they would give like the best of the grain, or the best, used typically, the first fruits as a thank you. That's just kind of the superstition. And so as a harvest festival, we just kind of got right into that. And so we made Jerusalem, as our main temple. And so with all these people swarming into the harvest festival, it just looked like a bunch of tents everywhere. So they just call it, Tabernacle Feast. That's my opinion. It just makes sense to me. It's like, you just see a sea of makeshift huts. And so the command to make things out of reeds just kind of came after the fact of that's what they were doing, probably to stay out of the elements. So they were just doing that already, so they just made it into a commandment. So, alright, I'm back. So, yes, so that's what basically did it for me to leave Judaism and the rituals and all this outright, because I saw it was totally BS and made up. I mean, that's just frank talk. It's a bunch of hooey, totally made up. And, because that's the whole literally foundation of stuff. You were not a people. So why would, it just baffles me why the elders of Judah coming out of Babylon would just invent a whole new history. Why? Because they want to mold the society into this new emerging, now I'm going to get off on an off topic, onto this new emerging monotheism. We were never monotheistic, ever. We were polytheistic. And so I just don't understand why a group of people, Jewish people, would want to adopt someone else's culture, change their own, and do that. You should be very proud of your own culture, period. Look, if you were, look at the Greeks. Just use the Greek. I'm making coffee right now. If you hear that noise. I don't know too many. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of them. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of Greeks that maybe worship Apollo, Zeus, and Pan, and Hermes, and whoever else. But the thing is, they don't. They're proud of that culture. It's them. It's theirs. We totally tried to eradicate it after 390. And why? It seems to be based on maybe Zoroastrianism had a serious maybe influence. Seems to be Zoroastrianism was based on Persian type, maybe Medes, I don't know, but Persian kind of influence, and eventually evolving around this time. And so you could see when we pin the Torah and other things, when they're redacting stuff, they left some of the old mythologies in there. And I'll give you an example. Okay, the rich history of Canaan and the polytheism is just like the Greeks with their polytheism there. They're pretty cool stories. I mean, and it's basically Hollywood script writing. They made these cool myths. You just leave them alone. It's just like Homer, okay? Why put so much stuff on a, like, you have to be this way, like an evangelical Christian, you're not saved unless you're my group, my personal group. It's like, okay, if I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, a Baptist is going to say, you don't need to do that, you're not, you're under the law. Blah, blah, blah. You're not going to be saved. Or like a Baptist to a Catholic, you heathen pig idolater, blah, blah, blah. Or, all these sect wars, it was like, unless you're in my group, you're not saved. Or like the Mohammed people, I'm gonna kill you. And it's like, dude, relax. You're all false. And stop believing in this stuff. We've been around for 2-3 million years, man. And it's like, you think all of a sudden in modern times, in the last 2,000 years, you're it? Come on, who do you think guided mankind the whole entire time? 2-3 million years. And it's like, just get over yourself. But yeah, that's what did it for me. And so, of course, I study still quite often. And makes papers still, because it's a cultural thing too, that's what it's talking about. Anyway, Judaism changed culture, how, there might have been a root through Zoroastrianism and kind of like a monotheism there is kind of like good versus bad, the yin-yang type of thing. But with Zoroastrianism, and it's like Job is basically a Zoroastrianism type of book, where Judaism, biblical Judaism, would be more like the three friends who said, yeah, you must have sinned. That's why these plagues are on you. Because if you read Deuteronomy 7, Deuteronomy 28, and Leviticus 26, I think, and it's like, if you obey, you'll be blessed. If you disobey, you'll be cursed. And if you disobey, I will take pleasure in destroying you. I mean, it says, I will take pleasure. And so, so it is a total hypocrisy thing. And now, granted, Job is not a Jew. He's somewhere else. Granted, but nonetheless, let's play with the story for me. And, it's totally against Jewish thought. Deuteronomy 7:28 and 7 and 28 and Leviticus 26 is totally against that line of thinking. For God all of a sudden just randomly out of the blue to curse a total righteous guy and kill all his kids and his, haul off his animals or kill them. I don't remember that part. I know he get hauled off, but I don't know if he kills all his servants and there's only one left, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. So you're painting God in an evil light. It's kind of like in Christianity, with Paul, and like maybe Calvinist or something. But, like, well, if God made you to be a vessel, to be this type of vessel, who are you to say to, who are you, the pot, to say anything to the potter? He made you for that purpose. I was like, dude, that's just not the thinking of that, the lead up, Deuteronomy 7 and 28 and then Leviticus 26, So if you obey, you are holy and blessed. Not obey for the fear of punishment, but to obey to be good all by yourself. Just on your own. Hey, I want to be a good person. I don't do that stuff. That's not me. Good motives, not like to avoid punishment. So anyway, Job is kind of, so I threw away Job long ago. I saw that as Zoroastrianism. That's a total contradiction. And besides, there is no Satan, in all Jewish scripture until you get past the post-exile scriptures. Got it? So anything before 586 BCE, there is no Satan. There's no Satan. As Chronicles, where it has Satan, is written after the Babylon captivity. And so, point blank, because it shows the descendants going past that. So, see what I'm saying? And Job talks about this heavenly Satan, where in Jewish scripture, a Satan is simply a human dude who opposes you. Like in a court of law, or just like Saul was to King David or General David. So he would be considered a Satan to a point, my accuser. So anyway, so here's the recap. I saw flaws early on between Samuel and Chronicles. Now I know there are hundreds and hundreds of them. I wrote them out. Lost a lot of them because I had them on my computer. My computer crashed, but I'm up to like 70 something now on ancient Judaism at blogspot.com. So I'm trying to think of them all. And I gained a lot more. Now I'm studying more. But so you saw that one contradiction, then saw that Genesis 1 through 11 were adopted myths. There's more than that, but and so I threw away Genesis 1 through 11 because they were adopted myths. And then later on was the Moses myth in the reed basket, being Sargon the Great and king of the Akkadians, and so blah blah blah. Then you see the Yom Kippur problems, and then you see when the Torah was actually written, had to be written, because these timestamps of the Ark of Noah landing on the mountains of Urartu. I gave you when that kingdom existed. Besides the Babylonian myths, when we went 586, so you got that. You got Genesis 36. Then these are the kings of Edom before any of the kings of Israel. So you got that. You got the twistings. What is what of the Ten Commandments when it comes to Sabbath? Was it because of slaves or because of creation? Or like the Pentecost commandments, was it, what's the commandment? Is it 2 rams and 1 lamb, or is it 1 ram and 2 lambs? Moses wrote it, gets confused. And so anyway, and so there's like a lot of problems like that. And then like I said, the Yom Kippur thing, that's really cemented it for me when the Torah was even written. And so you saw that. You saw there's no Messiah because it was post-event prophecy. You already know what the events are. Because you already lived it, went through it, or you know about it, and you're just throwing the facts of it in the mouth, making your own profit out of a famous dude or so-called famous guy. So you throw away that, then the whole Exodus story is the genuine history is King Ahmose defeats the Hyksos, drove them to the Canaanites, and they just got blended in with the normal Canaanite history, or Canaanite peoples, tribes and clans and so forth. And so it's all hooey. Now, as far as God himself goes, this El, we were polytheistic. The Canaanite goes way back. El is the genuine father of all the gods. He had a wife, and Ugaritic texts, you can find this yourself online, take my word for it. And he wasn't married to a goddess named Asherah, so it kind of makes more sense, and they had kids, like over 70 of them. And some of these gods are these: Baal, Yam, Jerusalem was named after, Salim. It's like one is god of the dusk and one is god of the dawn. It's kind of associated with Venus, like I was saying about Venus being so high, because here's the sun and it just kind of revolves around the sun. So when the sun sets, it can't go any higher than a certain point. It could go on the orbit higher and lower, but can't go higher than that. So yeah, we were polytheistic, and then we molded ourselves into a monotheism. So that's actually pretty new compared to the ancient ways of the polytheistic days, because we only have like literally 2,400 years of monotheism, where the polytheism goes way back, even for past 3,000 years already. Beyond that. And so we, so El is the father of, look it up, father of all the gods. And so when the elders rehash these old stories, it's like, let us make mankind in our image. The R there is not no Christian Trinity thing. It is, what's happening is, it's the old mythologies is El is the god of all his sons and daughters, so God of gods, the father of gods, and he's in the great assembly with these other gods who kind of morphed into angels maybe later on, but anyway, so he's basically, is known in the polytheistic days in the text that there's like the great assembly, and kind of like in Micaiah, for example, it says, who would entice Ahab that he'll fall in Ramoth Gilead, and the angels came forth from, one said this, one said that, finally one came forth, and this is like 1 Kings 22, 21, somewhere around there. It says, I will entice Ahab, and the Lord says, by what means? And he says, I'll be a lion spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. So go and you'll succeed. And so, kind of like that, So, but in the polytheism days, it's not angels, it's deities. Like demigods, the sons of El, sons and daughters of El. And so one of them is Baal. And so when you now understand that monotheism is new, starting around 390, you could say, they were never going astray after Baal. That was their normal practice. And because they already, the 390 BCE people knew about the Baal places of worship, and they wanted their deity, who became El and El alone, morphed into YHWH, this southern deity who came on the scene, like around 800 BCE, like Yehovah, or Yahweh, modern scholars call, but YHWH came on the scene maybe around 900 or something. Anyway, he morphed into El, like basically replaces El, or they're one the same eventually. Not that they originally were. And so now this YHWH character is now, the king of, God of gods, father of gods, and he is now married to Asherah, the wife of El. And so El is basically replaced or goes hand in hand being the same guy, where originally they weren't. Yehovah is like some other deity of a different group of people. And so it's interesting. Hey everyone, I'm going to have to cut out this video. I'm running out of memory on this phone of mine. And so I'm going to have to put a part 3 of this video of why I left Biblical Judaism. And remember to be sure to hit that subscribe button and the like button to help my channel out. And I'll see you in part 3.